Hi everyone, Gordon Hester here again. I hope you're doing well. I guess it's morning time there, so I hope you're getting ready to have a great day. I wanted to come on and kind of follow up from the call last night. So as I had kind of requested last night, I really wanted to get some feedback from the leadership, and certainly was excited to get a little bit of feedback for my video, because ultimately, as I explained on the call, I really want to be able to modify my events or my trainings in whichever way is going to help all of you. So the more feedback I get, the better. And as I promised on the call, if I saw something in the post with regard to a question, I would address the question if I didn't think I was going to have time to address it in my trainings, or maybe I wasn't going to address it to the level I'd like to. And so that's what prompted me to this video. I kind of, on the post yesterday, I got into a little bit of conversation with Lauren Berry about a question she had, which was an awesome question. And then one of, I believe somebody in her organization, and Jamie Lee, posted a question. And Jamie's question sort of prompted me, kind of inspired me to do this call tonight. And so let me read you Jamie's question so you can see what it is, because I think her question is a question that I suspect she's not the only one that asks. This is actually a pretty common question you get. It really has to do with the concept of leadership development, which is a big component of our business, or certainly one that is talked about a lot. So here's what Jamie's question was. Isn't it just important for leaders to find and train people to be leaders in their legs and teach them to do the same? Et cetera, et cetera. Isn't that micromanaging? So it's a great question, because I think it addressed really two important things: finding and training leaders. And I can tell you both of those are really important, because ultimately leaders have a major impact on the level of success that you have in this business. I always tell people, if you can't keep customers and you're micro entrepreneurs, so your dealers to SCs, you can never develop leadership. But if you're good at that, then the more independent leadership you build, the more success you're going to have in this business. So I thought the best way to kind of address this question is to just break it down into pieces. And let me start at the top: leadership development. Here's what I can tell you about leadership development. First of all, I'm not the definitive source on this. I can assure you whatever I share with you on this live video to give you my perspective on how I see this concept of leadership development in the Juice Plus business. There are others that might have very different opinions and actually might provide more value than me. So you're just getting my insight on this. But I will tell you, from a business perspective, it really jumps out for a reason. And the reason it jumps out to me is that leadership development is actually the most paid area of training in the world of business. So it is not that the Juice Plus world understands that leadership development is important. The entire business universe understands that. But here's the interesting thing: despite it being the most paid training area, there's been various studies to show it also has the lowest success rate. So kind of interesting that all this money gets spent, and all these resources, and all this time, and all the understanding that developing leadership matters, because leaders tend to drive cultures, but yet nobody really does it that well. So let's break this thing down into pieces. So kind of the first piece for me is, I don't know what all of you define as a leader. So in our business, a leader tends to be someone who has a team developing under them. So they've stepped into the role of leadership actually because they have a team, and they have taken on some role of mentoring or being an example for that team. And I think in network marketing, and certainly in the Juice Plus world, that's a common definition of leadership. But I will tell you that if that is the definition of leadership, you have to understand that there's various levels of that. So I know people that could lead one person or two people, and I know people that can lead teams of leaders. So the level of leadership is really important, because it's ultimately going to determine the size of your organization, and more important, your ability to effectively train any other leader. So when I look at leadership in the context of a business like your Juice Plus franchise, I kind of look at the concept of transformational leadership, the idea that I'm just not training. My whole coaching and business strategies works around this concept, that my role as a leader, if I'm working with other leaders, is to help them transform, to help them grow, to kind of help them learn to create an inspiring future and learn how to motivate and translate that to other people, learn how to build teams around that concept. learn how to be able to improve people's mindsets, get rid of limiting beliefs, help them develop new strategies, build new skill sets, build competencies. There's all these components that become part of the skill set of leadership. But I do think it's important to understand, if you're going to lead, understand that transformation is the game. Ultimately, the people that depend on you, wherever they're at in life, I don't care what stage of business they're in, they're always looking for something different, and that's the transformational component of leadership. So the second word that kind of jumped out to me in Jamie's question was the word find. And I will tell you, I believe this is one of the most critical skill sets in our business. And it is certainly something that I'm going to cover in greater detail in my training, in the leadership training. And why is this important? Because ultimately, finding leaders is a fundamental part of how network marketing works. And you'll hear different terms for it. It might be like gold mining is a common term. You might hear tap rooting, the idea of looking down within an organization to see where the leaders are, so that you can kind of lock arms with them. And I can tell you, this is an important concept to understand, because very rarely, and there's different studies on this, that I've seen the best statistics were that 1 out of 10 people that actually turns into a leader is a frontline person you recruited. So that gives you a perspective that 9 out of 10 are not. So what happens is you find your leaders through other people that are in the business, and that's the importance of reaching down in your organization. If I take Jeff's business, for example, I looked at his business the other day. He has 24 frontline leaders, and only 2 of them were actually recruited by him, but yet all of these are very solid. Most of them are multi-hundred club organizations, and many of them at one point in his organization were actually outside of his pay line. And what we learned really quick is outside of the pay line is the best insurance policy in the world in our business. But when you find a leader, don't get caught up into whether they're first line or second line, first generation or second generation. Wherever you find a leader, you want to lock arms with that person, because compression, which is the idea of people moving up in the marketing plan, is actually a pretty common thing, and it's certainly been a big part of Jeff's journey. I think it's also important to identify these leaders as soon as you can, and this goes back to the concept of time management. So if I were to look at many of the SCs and SSCs that I've coached, and when they're stuck, one of the biggest reasons is because they spend their time with the wrong people. So the Jensen Comp Company, the Jensen Group, did a big study on this, and they basically found that most big leaders spend most of their time with 4 to 8 people. So obviously, if you want to have a successful business, then you've got to be in the business of identifying leaders and locking arms and being able to help them develop. Ultimately, I will tell you this, and you'll hear me say this over and over again. I always tell people, if you want to know what it's like to go slow in business, get in the business of developing and motivating people. So we learned a long time ago that attraction works better than recruiting, and ultimately, it is easier for me to attract leaders than it is to build them. And probably the best example of this to me is Jeff. You know, when Jeff started his business, he went after people that he knew had success in network marketing. It's been a long time ago. I'm not sure that would be the right strategy now. But they were proven in the marketplace, and they were workers, and he knew that he could show them a system and that they had the ability and willingness to produce results. So I think if you want to get better at leadership development, here's a clue. Get people that are already developed. Get people that understand the power of this without you having to be the source of having to develop them to be successful in business. Ultimately, just remember the concept is pretty simple. Recruit self-motivated and self-learners. Kind of the next piece to me in the question was the word train. Because training is part of it. That's how leaders impact other leaders. That's how we help transform things. And I will tell you, if you're into that aspect of leadership, the first thing you have to pay attention to is what I call the relevancy factor. Because ultimately, you got to be careful on who you listen to in business as a trainer. I could tell you story after story, but one that kind of comes into mind is I had one of the U.S. leaders that was one of their fastest to go to NMD and had reached out to me a couple summers ago when she was at 12 Club and said, look, I'm stuck and I don't know why. Can you help me? And I did a call with her, and what was interesting about the call was I went over what I call the paying activities, and I'll cover that in the leadership training. But what I noticed was that she was doing all those paying activities, and then all of a sudden she wasn't doing any of them. And her business had stalled because she just wasn't focused on what drives the activity and the success of the business. But I was curious why. Why did you make this change? And it turned out that she had an upline who reached down to train her and mentor her, who honestly hadn't built the business, hadn't been in the trenches building for like many, many years. I can't remember how many years it was, but 10 plus years. So ultimately, you got to be careful. If you're going to be a trainer, you're going to train leaders, you need to make sure you're relevant. You need to make sure you're in the game. You need to make sure that you're always increasing your skill sets, because ultimately relevancy matters in your ability to impact people. Remember that training is not an education game, it's a development game, which means it's ultimately about increasing one's value to the marketplace, not just teaching. I kind of always tell people when it comes to developing, and I believe you have to build a good development plan. For me, the focus of it in the Juice Plus business is really simple. It's getting customers, recruiting team, retaining customers, building stronger team and game engagement, and building more and better influence. And I will tell you, if you focus on a development plan that does those 5 things better, what you're going to find is just works better, because you're going to see a result in the business, and that's ultimately what matters. Now, the other part of the question that jumped out was this concept of training others, duplication. And I will tell you that this is a tricky area. Duplication really matters. We always, with Jeff, set a goal, and that is duplication had to occur early and as quickly as we could, and the goal was to get to a point of having an independent sales coordinator. So on the early stages of business, from the dealer to the SC level, which we call the micro entrepreneurs, what we really taught were systems and processes. We really didn't get heavy into the development game. And the reason was because when we got heavy into the development game, we started competing against time. So if they were to invest an hour in the business and I had 50 minutes of it being spent on development, then unfortunately I had 10 minutes spent on the activities that drive their business. So we learned really early that complexity is the enemy of execution. Keep it simple, teach the sales systems. And all over the world, when I'm working with leaders and I see them doing really well in this micro-entrepreneurial phase, this process of moving dealers to SCs, we see strong systems. If I look at when Jeff started, back when Jeff started, they had these things called classified ads. And I know some of you are so young, you probably don't even know what they are, but they used to have newspapers, and people ran job wants, help wanted ads in there. And Jeff would go in and run ads, and he would get literally hundreds and hundreds of people to talk to. And he built this into a system where he had content for ads. He taught people scripts. He had the meeting formats. This thing was really built into systems and processes. And this is what he taught. And the idea was tell, show, try, do. Tell somebody what to do, show them how to do it, let them try it with your supervision, and once they're doing it, they're on their own. And he was so successful at keeping the focus at this early stage of the business of duplication about the system that he moved a lot of people quickly, and it took him about 30 days to build somebody to a point of independence. So I think it's important, if you're going to look to duplicate, you remember that duplication is about simplicity, and development done the wrong way starts to build complexity. It starts to compete against the focus of time. And, I think the question you have to ask yourself if you're looking at your systems is just a really simple one. If I were to sign up in your business and I were to follow your systems, could I be successful? And if the answer is no, then you've got to resystemize. You've got to think about what you're doing, because ultimately, if your systems are good and somebody's willing to do the work, then they should be able to get the result that you want. I will tell you that the successful leaders, as I said, teach these systems of micros. This is sort of very fundamental in network marketing. And when it gets into developing sort of leadership development programs, this is an entirely different proposition and well beyond the context of what I can explain in this call. But I will tell you, just be careful. Remember, duplication and simplicity are important. The other question, the other word that jumped out to me in the question was the word micromanagement. And I hear this a lot, and I tend to hear it a lot from SCs to QNMDs. I call it the SC to QNMD trap. And remember, to me, micromanagement, this idea of control, is really the wrong mindset. And it's the wrong mindset because if you're looking to scale a business, if you're looking to build something bigger than you don't want to embrace control. You want to embrace autonomy. So I always tell people, you want to help guide people. You never want to tell them everything to do. You never want to be the answer to everything. And we always looked at micromanagement as a sign, and that sign was that we're working with the wrong people. If I had somebody that required this much work to build them to a point of independence, then I had to really take a look at the choice of how I'm spending time and the way I'm spending time with people. And a lot of our management is how we built systems around things. So I'm kind of leave you with this last piece. So what advice would I give you? You know, Jamie, you asked me the question. Hopefully you got some value out of the call, but here's kind of my advice I would give you. Listen, if you think about it, development is about becoming good at something, and that something is problem solving. And if you want to become a good problem solver, start learning by solving your own problems. I look back on my life and I think, you know, why have I become, you know, kind of my goal in business, my standard I set around problem solving was you're never going to give me a problem I can't solve. You can imagine how difficult that is, but I work every day to be able to solve any problem that somebody gives me. And I will tell you the reason I can do that is because I never saw problems as anything but a gift. They were my way to learn. They were the gift that life gave me to get better. And I always embraced that thinking. I never looked for people to give me the answers to things. I always was willing to do the hard work to find the answer because I knew in that was that whole development key. And I also understood that so often this idea of becoming a good problem solver, being able to solve the problems of those on your team, ultimately is a process. And so many people, I think, struggle with problem solving because they think it's an event. They think there's some magic dust that somebody can throw on them and all of a sudden the world's different. And it kind of really doesn't work that way. You know, if you kind of think about how do you develop problems, living in the trenches, solving real problems, that's why they say experience is the best teacher. So, you know, I encourage you, find out, identify the problems in your business and go after them and really fight to figure out how to solve those, because with those, you're going to develop an incredible skill set. And kind of my last piece of advice, it has to do with something that I've always done, which is find great mentors. If you find a great mentor, what they can do is begin to teach you how to compress time. And what I mean by that is if learning and problem solving and leadership development is a process, maybe that process takes a year, but with a good mentor, maybe I can compress that down to a month. So much of my entire coaching is connected to this concept of compressing time, of teaching people how to get more value from time and teaching people to be better problem solvers in a faster way. So hopefully, Jamie, that gave you some perspective to the question you asked. I hope you found this useful. I really look forward to seeing everybody in, one more week. And if you have any more questions, please post them. I would love to see them and take the time to answer them. Thanks again. Have a great day. Bye-bye.